1. Managed collapse. While the headlines focus on the immediate chaos of Operation Epic Fury, the real story is buried in the deep structural shifts of what we are calling the Trump world order. To the casual observer, Donald Trump's rhetorics sound like a leader who has lost control of a spiraling situation. But if we apply the cold logic of game theory, a different, much more unsettling picture begins to emerge. 2. Rethinking the objective. We have to ask a strange, counterintuitive question. What if the goal isn't to win this war in the traditional sense? What if the objective is actually to lose, or at least to dismantle, the old American empire? For a century, the US has exhausted its blood and treasure to maintain a globalized new world order that, in Trump's view, has only succeeded in hollowing out the American middle class and ballooning a $39 trillion debt. 3. Controlled demolition strategy. If you wanted to kill that old system and replace it with a resource-based technate, a fortress North America that owns the next century, you wouldn't start by making peace. You would start by cutting the global heart out. You would collapse the energy and fertilizer supply chains that the rest of the world relies on, forcing every other nation to crawl back to the only two pillars left standing: North America and Russia. Is this the erratic behavior of a buffoon, or is it the most aggressive restructuring of global power since World War II? Today, we aren't just looking at a war. We're looking at the controlled demolition of the 20th century to make way for a new, brutal baseline. 4. Energy and fertilizer trap. To understand the genius of this collapse, you have to look at the math of dependency. The primary objective of the Iran conflict isn't just a regime change in Tehran. It's the total, irreversible redirection of global trade. The world currently relies on the Middle East for 20% of its oil, but that's only half the story. This region is the global hub for phosphate, ammonium, sulfur, and urea, the four horsemen of modern agriculture. Without them, there is no fertilizer. Without fertilizer, there is no food. 5. Asia dependency shock. Japan, South Korea, India, and the EU are currently staring down a barrel. Japan, for instance, gets 75% of its crude through the Strait of Hormuz. If Trump closes that valve by bombing them to the Stone Ages, he isn't just hitting Iran, he is knocking out the industrial heart of every US rival. 6. From market to survival system. By the time the global reserves run dry, estimated by some analysts to be as early as mid-April, the globalized world effectively ends. At that point, the market disappears and is replaced by a survival auction. Nations will no longer care about human rights or democratic values. They will care about who can give them a gallon of diesel and a bag of urea. And in that new world, only two entities hold the keys: the North American technate and the Russian Third Rome. This isn't a dip in the economy. It is a trap designed to make the rest of the world's survival dependent on a US permission slip. 7. Greater North America. While the world's attention is fixed on the mountains of Iran, a more permanent map is being drawn at home. Secretary of War Peter Hegseth recently revealed a strategic vision that looks less like a country and more like a technate, a vertically integrated, resource-independent fortress called Greater North America. To the casual observer, Trump's interest in buying Greenland or his pressure on Mexico seem like random acts of nationalism. But through the lens of game theory, these are the tactical requirements for continental consolidation. If you believe the global order is collapsing, you don't try to save everyone. You secure the perimeter. 8. Energy and water pillars. Look at the data driving this map. In a world defined by a long war, only three things matter for survival: energy, food, and water. First, the energy pillar. By integrating Canadian oil sands with US shale and potentially neutralizing Venezuelan reserves, Greater North America becomes the undisputed energy king. We move from being a participant in the oil market to being the owner of it. Second, the water pillar. While the Middle East and Africa hit a terminal wall of water stress, North America holds the world's most resilient freshwater reserves. In this new world order, water isn't just a utility, it's a strategic defense asset. 9. Security perimeter. By locking the gates at the Panama Canal and the Arctic Circle, the US creates a resource island, protected by the two greatest moats in history, the Atlantic and Pacific. The technate can effectively ignore the chaos of Eurasia. 10. From system to control. Trump's strategy is to let the old world burn through energy and fertilizer shortages, while we consolidate the entire Western Hemisphere into a single, impenetrable economic unit. This isn't just America first, it's North America only. The goal is to build a wall of resources so high that when the rest of the world faces a decade of famine, they have no choice but to accept our terms. We are no longer the world's policeman. We are the world's landlord. 11. Debt as leverage. For decades, critics called the US a paper tiger, held together by a $39 trillion Ponzi scheme. They argued that if China or Japan stopped buying our debt, the American experiment would end. But the Trump world order flips the script on the creditors. Here is the math of the trap. If you are Japan and the Middle East has been bombed back to the Stone Ages, where do you get the fuel to keep your population from freezing? You get it from the US or Russia. But to buy that energy, you need credits. You need the dollar. 12. From debt to enforcement. By weaponizing the energy and fertilizer supply chains, Trump turns US debt from a liability into a survival tether. These nations cannot dump treasuries because those treasuries are the only thing that can be exchanged for North American calories and fuel. The debt isn't being paid off, it's being enforced. We are moving from a finance economy where we begged people to lend us money to a resource dominant economy where the world pays us whatever we ask just to keep their lights on. The old system was built on trust. The new one is built on the cold reality of biological and industrial necessity. 13. The mirror system. To understand where Trump is going, you have to look at his mirror image. Vladimir Putin. This isn't just a coincidence of two nationalist leaders. It is a shared recognition of a dying system. Putin isn't just fighting for territory in Ukraine, he is implementing what scholars call the Third Rome strategy. For the last 5 years, Putin has been force industrializing Russia, moving his entire economy to a permanent total war footing. In Russia, the military-industrial complex is no longer a secondary sector. It is the primary driver of the GDP. 14. 2 fortress pillars. The data here is chilling. By securing Ukraine, Russia now controls nearly 1/3 of the world's exported calories. Combine that with their massive natural gas and oil reserves, and you see the same technate logic at play. Putin and Trump are running the exact same playbook. They both believe the Western liberal order, the era of multiculturalism, global trade, and paper finance, is a terminal patient. They aren't trying to save the hospital, they are building lifeboats. Putin is securing the Eurasian heartland to ensure Russia is the most resilient pillar when the West collapses. Trump is doing the same for the Western Hemisphere. They are the 2 fortress pillars left standing. This isn't a conflict between them, it's a mutual pact to let the middle, Europe, China, and the Middle East, burn. 15. Final conclusion. National rejuvenation. What we are witnessing today is not just a change in administration. It is the deliberate, managed end of Pax Americana. For 80 years, the United States served as the guarantor of a globalized New World Order, a system that prioritized open seas and international cooperation over domestic stability. But that era is being dismantled from within. 16. National rejuvenation strategy. Trump's strategy is a pivot toward national rejuvenation. The goal is to replace a fragile, debt-laden global empire with a protected, self-sufficient technate, a fortress fueled by our own infinite resources and anchored by a return to the foundational values of the nation. It is a bet that in a world of coming chaos, the only things that will matter are the ground beneath your feet and the strength of the walls around you. The next decade won't belong to the nation with the best software, the most likes, or the most complex financial derivatives. It will belong to the nation that can feed its people and fuel its tanks while the rest of the world descends into a resource-driven dark age. 17. Playing for history. This brings us to the ultimate intersection of geopolitics and history. If you analyze these events through the lens of eschatology, the study of ultimate destinies, you see that these leaders aren't just playing for the next election. They are playing for the history books. They believe the old world is terminal, and they are competing to see who can build the most resilient lifeboat before the storm fully hits. If the objective was to destroy the old American empire in order to save the American people, then the idiot in the headlines might actually be the most cold-blooded architect of the next century. 18. Just in time, just in case. We are moving away from a world of just-in-time efficiency and into an era of just-in-case survival. The long war isn't a disaster to be feared. It is the high-octane fuel for this transformation. The signals are screaming, from the recruitment offices in Georgia to the medical warehouses in Germany. The map has been redrawn, and the rules of wealth have been rewritten. 19. Inside or outside. The only question left is, once the walls of the fortress are finished, will you be on the inside, or will you be part of the world that was left behind? Keep your needle pointed here. I'm Compass. Thanks for navigating with me. Enjoying the content? Your support means everything. Subscribe, like, and drop a comment. It helps us create more and better videos for you. Thank you so much for watching.